generation. My parents were immigrants, and I always like to say sports was our way in. And so when I was little and I started playing t-ball and baseball, my parents got into it, and all of a sudden just playing wasn't enough. So I watched the Yankees, I watched the Mets, and we didn't have cable, so anytime sports was on in my household, it was a big deal. So when it was on, I watched, whether it was NFL on Sunday or NBA on NBC, whatever it may have been. So that kind of got me into it. And then from there, I really started to pay attention to the art of the craft, how Bob Costas could turn a phrase and how he could really crystallize and capture a moment, an event. I mean, if you watch, Game 6 of the 98 NBA Finals when Jordan hits the shot, this is on, and he paints the picture, hey, if this is our final image of Michael Jordan, it's like an artist admiring his final brushstroke. And, the way he kind of put that all together, I was just blown away with that. And, I was watching Len Berman anchor, weeknights on WNBC and listening to Ian Eagle on the radio and Marv Allen on the games. So, you kind of have all these influences. And probably more than anything, the guys who did the Yankees on the radio, John Sterling and Michael Kay. I mean, we didn't have cable. Yankees on TV I watched. When it was past my bedtime, I took my radio, a little pocket radio, took it to sleep. I'd listen to all the West Coast games for summer, and I'd fall asleep listening to those guys. And that was my soundtrack over the summer, that, Mike and the Mad Dog. So it was really 24/7, around the clock, sports. And then you get to a point where you realize, 5'10", probably isn't going to cut it to play center field for the Yankees. So what's the next best?
Yes, where in North Jersey are you guys from? Because I live in Jackson, New Jersey.
Yeah, so we're in a little town called Bloomfield. It's about 20 minutes with traffic to New York City, right by Giant Stadium. It's famously known as the place where the final scene of The Sopranos was shot before the black.
Yeah. So speaking of, I guess if we can start. I want to ask you. So I'm a Yankee fan. I'm a Yankee fan growing up too, and I want to talk about. Let's start with the Yankees here real quick. Obviously, with no sports, and we don't know. Actually, the baseball season is in jeopardy right now because of the pandemic. But obviously, we're getting Korean baseball now on ESPN. So first of all, what are your thoughts on that? Korean baseball, watching at 3 a.m. or 5 a.m. Usually.
Yeah, so I got a 2-year-old, so I'm not staying up that late. I am pretty much out by 10 o'clock on most nights. Maybe fall asleep to something in bed by 11, but she gets up fairly early, so I'm not staying up to watch KBO. However, had I been in that position, I could stay up late. I probably would because, right now as a sports fan, we need something. We need a fix.
Yeah.
If it's, hacky sack, if it's hopscotch, if it's live sporting events that are going on now, and it's on during the hours I'm awake, I will be watching it. So I think it gives baseball-starved fans and sports fans that are missing, real-time action, it gives them a little something. And so I actually have DVR'd a few of the games already. And so, at some point I will watch some of them and go through them.
Yeah, So let's get to the Yankees. Me and my friends had the opportunity of meeting Michael Kay in person, and Michael Kay is one of the best, like you said, one of the best play-by-play people for the Yankees. And what are your thoughts on the Yankees this year if they do have a season? And what was your reaction when they signed like Garrett Cole to the monster deal and to that 9-year, $324 million deal?
So I've got a funny story about that. Actually, the night that he signed, my wife is at this charity auction dinner with her boss, who is Bobby Labonte, a NASCAR driver, NASCAR Hall of Famer. And sitting next to her at this table is Gene Monahan, who's the trainer for the Yankees. So I get a text from her, and she's not really a big sports fan, that night. And she's like, hey, this guy Gene Monahan is sitting next to me. Do you know who that is? He has something to do with the Yankees. And I said, Gene Monahan, yeah, he's the trainer. She goes, yeah, you want him to sign something for you? And I'm not really big on like memorabilia from sports.
Right.
So I said, just ask him, are we going to get Garrett Cole? So she texts me back, and the response was 70% yes, we think we're going to get him. So he comes home later that night around like 10:30 from this event, And I would say like 15 minutes after she walked through the door, I get the alert on my phone, the Yankees signed Garrett Cole. So she may have broken that news. I don't know. It was fun.
Wow, that's awesome. Wow, but so if they do have a season, what do you expect from Garrett? Obviously, he wanted to become he wanted to become a Yankee, and he was a Yankee fan growing up. And what do you expect him to be in the first year?
Oh, listen, I think he'll be every bit the ace he's been the last couple of years. This season for the Yankees really is imperative because, Garrett Cole is signed into a 9-year contract. It's very difficult for him to stay as productive as he's been of late for the duration of the entire 9 seasons. So, in that first 4 or 5 years, to me, that is really your championship window. And that window opened in 2017. We're now in the middle of it, maybe even closer to the end of it. Because, again, Judge and Sanchez and Torres, those guys are going to, already get into their arbitration years. It's going to cost a lot. There's probably going to have to be some tough decisions at some point, even with the Yankees' budget, on who to keep and who goes. So right now that core is still young enough. Cole, to me, gave them what they were missing last year, which was a bona fide ace. If this time off helps Paxton heal, pitching like an ace when he was healthy, missing all of last season, that really hurt him. I mean, a healthy Severino might mean the difference between, having home field against the Astros and not having home field against the Astros. So, a lot of moving parts there. But to me, they're in their window, and I think they've got a shot as good as anybody. But, Tanaka's a free agent at the end of the season. Pat's a free agent. LeMahieu's a free agent. They have some key decisions to make on a lot of these guys. Severino's health is a question mark. So to me, this is really the year where they can get it done. But, the bigger question is going to be, what have these guys been doing in the interim? When teams come back out of shape, the injury bug was an issue last year. I mean, how ready are they going to be when and if the season restarts? So to me, this entire season now, went from having really high hopes for the Yankees to, now you sort of hold off with bated breath a little bit because I really don't think anybody knows what to expect from anybody because of this long layoff. We don't know how guys are working out. We don't know who's letting themselves go. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, we just need Yankees baseball back. I'm a huge Yankee fan, so we just need to see some kind of baseball, anything. But so I want to talk more about your career though first. So obviously you've done a lot of stuff with ESPN and college football, and you have done play-by-play actually too with college football. And I want to ask you, how is the experience like working with these people, like all these college football analysts, like what's his name, Bobby Carpenter, and all these people doing the play-by-play. So what's it like, the experience like for college football?
I'm not sure. So I'm not sure I understand that question. What's the?
Oh, sorry, not Bobby Carpenter. I'm thinking of your. I forgot your coworker's name. But how's it like working with them, the ESPN crew, and doing the play-by-play for college football?
I think again, there's really nothing that beats the thrill of calling a game in front of 80,000 people, 100,000 people at a big stadium, whether at night at LSU, whether it's on the road at Auburn or Clemson. The thrill of that is a pure adrenaline rush. And then at ESPN, we're fortunate where we get to work with some of the best and brightest in the business. We get to work with great producers and great people around us who amplify us and help us look better. And you have so much at your disposal where it really allows you to explore your creativity. It really allows you to kind of take risks and take chances. One of the things I really enjoy working with our ESPN college football crew is there is this innovation factor. We're always looking to kind of do something different, change the way we do things. My guy, Naveed Kajabi, he is part of our crew. He's on right now.
Oh.
So, shout out to my man, Naveed. We call him the player. So, Naveed is the go-get-ish done guy, and he makes a lot of the stuff happen behind the scenes. But again, like we have a really great crew, and so you put all those pieces together. Certainly we have a lot on our plates individually, but it really is like a collective team effort. And I tell people all the time, what you see on the air, and you may just hear us and you may just see the pictures, but it's a team effort every day, every week. And it just doesn't happen on game day. I mean, we're communicating the entire week.
Yeah, so speaking of, this kid named Global Kid Media, he joined, he said 3 talented Indians here. And then he said that, so this kid, actually, speaking of Global Kid Media, you should check his page out after. He's 13 years old, and he's interviewed 1,000 people at 13 years old. It's crazy.
That's good.
But,
yeah. I'm sure we'll see him in the business.
Yeah. But my next question here, what was your most memorable play-by-play game you ever called in college football?
Wow. Boy, there's a lot, man. And they all blend in. I think I wouldn't say it's one. It's probably a string of games where a few years ago when Deshaun Watson first broke in as the starter at Clemson, I called 4 of his first 5 starts, including his first 3 starts. And I remember it was a night game against North Carolina in Death Valley. And all these games were at Clemson, so you have this amped-up electric atmosphere. And when Watson took the field, that first game against UNC, he had a record-setting night. I think he set the school record for touchdown passes in a game and either broke or came close to breaking the record for passing yards in a game. And I remember going to my analyst, Kelly Stauffer, at the time. We looked at each other at halftime, and we said, this kid is the real deal. And he was a true freshman at the time. At that time, Clemson was a program that was ascending, but it was not the big game program it is now. It was still Clemson. It was still, hey, they gave up 70 to West Virginia. And as strong as they've been, the reputation was this is a program that stubs their toe in big games. Watson, the rival, you just sense something different. And we even said it in the second half of that game. They had already lost, I think, 1 or 2 games by that point with Cole Stout starting. They'd lost to Florida State. They'd lost to somebody else, might have been Georgia. And I remember saying in the second half of that game, we may have just witnessed a championship window open up for Clemson. And it did. The year after they played Bama in the championship, 2 years later, they win a championship when Watson was a junior. But to really see that momentum swell up from the ground up was something to behold. And he was unbelievable against UNC. He was phenomenal against NC State the game after. Then we had Louisville. And then we had, I think it was Syracuse. I think he was hurt for the Syracuse game. I'm not sure he played in that game. But, we had 4 games in a 5-game stretch, all at Clemson. And you sort of saw the dawn of Deshaun, the genesis of really a renaissance for this program where they, went from being the program that almost could get to the top to the program that, now in my opinion is the program in college football.
Yeah. So speaking of Deshaun Watson, what do you think of him as a quarterback now? I mean, from you when you called the game for him and now becoming that NFL player.
Yes, it's unique to watch. It's not just Deshaun. It's a lot of guys. You see them in college. And then, I have like a box, literally, of every spotting board for every game I've ever done. And usually I'll organize them before the season, at some point during the summer. And, you kind of flip through and you'll see the names. Hey, Le'Veon Bell was here, LaMarcus Joyner, Jameis Winston, Deshaun Watson, Sammy Watkins. And you come across these names and, it's interesting. Hey, I remember these guys when, and then you see what they're doing now. It's cool. So, to watch them in the playoffs last year and how close they got. I mean, they had Kansas City on the ropes, nearly got to the Super Bowl. It was a fascinating. It's fascinating to see how those guys grow and evolve and become stars at the next level.
Yeah. So speaking of Clemson and all these other teams, but I want to talk about Clemson because Trevor Lawrence. Do you think he can take the next level in college football? And then, and obviously, everyone's expecting him to be the number 1 pick for the next year's draft. But what do you see in Trevor Lawrence's game? Does he need to improve in anything, or is he a complete quarterback already?
A couple of years ago when he was a freshman, I remember sitting in Dabo Sweeney's office, and I said to Dabo, you told me that you'll never coach a quarterback as good as Deshaun Watson again. And before I could finish my sentence, he looks at me and he goes, yeah, sheesh. And then we get this kid, Trevor, huh? How about that? And Watson was, Lawrence came in more polished, more physically ready, which sounds astonishing. And the way he played, especially in that championship against Alabama, didn't blink once. He was the best player on the field, one of the best players on the field that night. That showed me a lot. The kid's lost one game in his career, and that was the LSU championship. The first practice that I saw him, there were NFL scouts there, and Clemson has, a slew of prospects. And so we side up to a few of these NFL scouts and, hey, what do you think of this guy? What do you think of this guy? And one of them just kind of comes over and says, tell you what, that quarterback, and this is before Lawrence had even become the starter. Kelly Bryant was starting. So I think it was before Lawrence took over. And one of the scouts, watching Trevor Lawrence pass and, guys break their routes and the ball's there waiting for them. One of these scouts says to me, if that kid could go pro right now, he'd be the number one pick. And I looked at him and I said, wow. So, again, the future is incredibly bright. He's got great head on his shoulders. He's a winner. He understands culture. He's a leader. He's a deceptively fast runner, as we saw in the championship game when he was a freshman. And, again, he's got accuracy. He's got arm strength. Every quiver or every arrow in the quiver he has. And so I think he's going to be a superstar with good health in the NFL.
So obviously, and then also LSU is going to have a new quarterback because Joe Burrow's gone. So what is your take on this Patterson kid as a quarterback?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Oh, the LSU quarterback Patterson. What do you think? What do you think he can bring to them?
Listen, there's going to be big shoes to fill, right? I mean, you have huge shoes to fill. Joe Burrow just put together the greatest season by a quarterback, arguably, in the history of college football. If you look at what Burrow did, the amount of touchdown passes he threw in one season at LSU over a career would have been good for like top 2 or top 3 all time. And he did that in one season. You put his season up there with what Lamar Jackson did and what Tim Tebow did. I mean, it is right there with one of the great seasons by a quarterback in the history of the sport. So what Patterson, whether it's Miles Brennan, I mean, whatever you have at LSU, it's not going to be Joe Burrow. But I think the bigger factor, too, is, when you have success, oftentimes your assistants get plucked. And losing Dave Aranda from the defensive side, losing Joe Brady to the Panthers, I wouldn't underestimate that impact. Because one thing Ed Orgeron did really well, he hired great people around him. And Brady and Aranda were two of the best coordinators offensively and defensively. And as great as Joe Burrow was, I think you have to give a lot of credit to the scheme and what Joe Brady did schematically to make sure that these unbelievable athletes on the outside and in the backfield have opportunities in space. And now Burrow was the maestro. He made plays and he threw it in tight windows. Don't take anything away from that. But again, I think coaching staff continuity is critical. You look at Clemson's success, for example. Since Dabo Swinney has been there, only 2 coaches have left voluntarily. Jeff Sutton to take the head coaching job at South Florida, and Chad Morris left to take the head coaching job at SMU in his home state of Texas. So I'm a big believer in coaching continuity, especially at the college level. And that's an area where I have a question about LSU more than the quarterback position.
So here's my last question for LSU standpoint. So obviously they lost their offensive coordinator, Joe Brady. How big of a loss will that be for LSU? Do you see them taking a step back, or do you see them being that top team still?
Well, again, when you lose Joe Burrow, when you lose the Heisman winner, when you lose the number 1 pick in the draft, you're not going to replace that. You're not going to replace that. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you lose him. You lose some really good receivers. You lose some guys up front. You lose some key players on the defensive side, some key cornerbacks. But when you couple that with losses to both coordinators, the only school that I've seen consistently withstand the attrition of assistant coaches has been Alabama. Ed Orgeron is not your typical X's and O's type of coach. He delegates. If you watch him at practice, he's like a D-line coach, and he spends time with the D-line, which is his bread and butter. He delegates the other position groups, and especially the offense, to his offensive assistants. So, yeah, I do think losing Brady will be significant. I think losing Dave Aranda will be significant as well. You're talking about one of the best D coordinators in the country. So LSU, again, those holes coupled with the talent they lost, that's going to be significant. They've recruited well, so you expect them to have athletes. And maybe we don't know their names yet, but we will.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think losing Brady and losing Aranda, those are two significant losses. So, they're not a favorite in my book to repeat.
Right.
But I still think, this is a preseason top 5 team.
Right. So we have a question for you here from Global Kid Media. He said he wants you to talk about your getting on ESPN through winning the reality series competition.
Yeah, so that's actually not true. I didn't win. I was on the reality show back in 2004, and it was in the final 3, but I didn't win, which in hindsight was probably the best thing to happen to me. To be honest with you, when I did that, a lot of it was just being in the right place at the right time, and I happened to be in Boston, which is not where I'm from. Just happened to be there the weekend where they had the auditions, and the auditions were across the street from where my cousin worked. And she said to me, "Hey, you should try out." I'm like, "Yeah." Like, "No, you should do it." Okay, went in, and then one thing led to another. So I ended up, going out for the competition, getting selected, getting to the final 3. I didn't win, but more than I think it certainly helped in terms of having some contacts and having some familiarity with some folks there. But I went back and I basically started from square one. I mean, I took a job in Yakima, Washington to be a sports director, making $20,000 a year. And I was there for 2 years cutting my teeth, editing, logging footage, reporting, anchoring, producing, basically doing every aspect of the job as a one-man sports department. And I learned so much, and I learned how to hit a curveball, and I learned what to do when, your live shot doesn't work and you don't have your monitor. I learned what to do when the wrong tape fires or when the prompter operator is asleep at the switch. Those are the things I feel helped me be ready for the ESPN opportunity when it came. I didn't start as a play-by-play guy. I started as a studio anchor and a host. Being able to get to ESPN and hit the ground running, to me, it wasn't so much the reality show. It was more, again, working in a small market, cutting my teeth and learning the ropes in a small market. That helped me, I think, more than anything else.
Interesting. So what advice would you give these young sports reporters that are trying to be like play-by-play guys or whatever, or ESPN anchors? So what advice would you give them, the young sports broadcaster?
The simple one, it really, more than anything, is read. It sounds really simple and fundamental, but it's read. And not just about sports. Cultural literacy has a lot of value. And I was incredibly fortunate. My mom came from a family of readers. And one of the things that we did when I was a kid, we kind of struck a deal, because when I was 7, 8 years old, we'd go to the library and I'd pick out a sports book, and I'd pick out another sports book. I'd return it, pick out another sports book. And she said, "Okay, here's the deal. For every sports book you want to check out, I'm going to pick the next one." I'm like, "What? That's not fair." It would be something like education. And I found out that the books that she was picking, after a while, like, there was significance to them. Like, when I was a kid, it'd be like Alice in Wonderland. I go, "Why do I want to read Alice in Wonderland?" And then classic. And then as I got older, it was like The Diary of Anne Frank and Wuthering Heights and Catch-22. And all of a sudden, by the time I got through high school, and like, my mom passed away when I was in high school. When I got through, I had read all these classics, and it was kind of this deal. And then it got to the point where, like, she didn't have to pick them out for me anymore. I just enjoyed it. So, like, the bookshelf behind me, like, those are all my sports books. What you can't see, well, maybe you can. Like, right. Those are all the classics. Like,
wow,
horizontal shelf, and that's not what I have on Kindle. So for me, it was just like this love of reading, and I found out, hey, like, reading Shakespeare and reading Tolstoy and reading Hemingway, like, this stuff helps you. And when I was in college, my freshman year, I remembered, there was a speaker that we had in one of my communications classes who was like another adjunct or something. And she used to say, you know, anytime she'd watch TV or she'd read a book and she came across a word or a phrase, she would write it down on a napkin or whatever. And I said, that's a great idea. So I started keeping these notebooks. So every time now, you know, if you're reading stuff on the Kindle, you can screenshot it. But by hand, I would scribble it in this notebook. And I've got dozens of these notebooks now. And I always take one with me on the road. And I just kind of flip through it. And it just puts words and phrases in your head, things that you've seen over the years. And again, I think the foundation piece of what we do is writing. And I always tell people, like, whether you're broadcasting live, you're still talking live. You're still writing. You're writing in real time. You're writing without spell check. You're writing without editing, but you're still writing. When you're anchoring at ESPN, we all wrote our own scripts. We didn't have anybody write for us.
Right.
Not that way in local news. It's not that way at some network news stations where producers will write. At ESPN, we all had our own voice. So we wanted to write our own material. And the only way you can become a better writer is by reading. And so that, I would say, you know, where does it start? Yeah, reps behind the microphone and reps in front of the camera. All that stuff is important. But if you can't contextualize what you want to say, if you can't coherently put together what you want to say, then none of that matters. And context is everything. You know, this is an event. This happened. What's the significance? What's the meaning of it? Can you contextualize an event, right? Take Jackie Robinson playing baseball, right? Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier is significant because it happened before Rosa Parks gave up her seat on the bus. It happened before MLK's speech. It happened 10 years before Brown versus Board of Ed. So Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier isn't just a baseball event. Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier was the first stone thrown in the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
And so, again, finding context for what's going on in real time, I mean, that's the challenge. It's not just this happened. Is he the best or the worst? Is he the greatest or the worst? No, it's can you find context? Can you have that historical background? So that's why I tell people read, and read about more than just sports.
Yeah, that's that's facts, straight facts right there. So before we get to the rapid fire questions, there's a question for you from Lambo Media. He said, do you need to go to college to become a big time sports journalist?
You don't need to go to college, but I think it helps. I think that liberal arts education, you know, taking those humanities classes, taking those English lit classes, taking those history classes, those are the things that make you a better journalist. Anybody can learn journalism. You can learn how to report, you can learn how to fact find, but like we're talking about, how can you contextualize? That's what separates people who are in the business and people who are successful in the business. So those classes I found helped me. You know, you learn the craft, but somebody could say write in the active voice, but if you have a weak vocabulary, well, writing in the active voice is difficult, or you're going to keep using the same words over and over again. How do you refresh your vocabulary? How do you find context? How do you find metaphors and similes to tie in what you're talking about? That's from the rest of your education. So do you have to go to college? No, not necessarily. Listen, you can do it with a library card, but there is a level of education that you need. And I'm not saying college is a must for that, but you have to be committed to wanting to learn, wanting to read, and wanting to know, especially on a variety of subjects, if this is something you really want to do.
Yeah, so here, you ready for the rapid fire questions?
Let's go.
So Kawhi Leonard, huh? Oh.
When he was on TV, it felt like an event, and it was a big deal. You didn't have sports on as much as you do. With LeBron, and this really isn't LeBron's fault, his greatness gets cheapened at times because we see so much of him. If you want to watch every Lakers game, or when he played with the Cavs or the Heat, every Heat or Cavs game, you could have. It's on TNT or it's on ESPN. It's on somewhere. Jordan was on maybe once every couple of weeks, NBA on NBC, and when he was on, it was a huge event if you lived outside of Chicago. So less was more. So when we saw him, it felt bigger, and everything he did then became bigger. we lose that, I think, with some of the modern athletes and the 24-hour news cycle that we're in now, where, yeah, Jay-Z, Kanye, current, and then old school. I'm a 90s kid, so Tupac, Biggie, but probably Tupac over Biggie all day long. I mean, old school, like mid-90s rap, I thought rap peaked back then. 48, 72 hours. Like, me and my high school buddies, a lot of them I hadn't spoken to in a long time. Like, we speak a few times a year. Like, we're on this text thread that has still continued until now. Like, we reconnected over his death because we're like, hey, man, like, did you see this? And all of us were in shock. We couldn't believe it. I mean, it's sort of commiserating with each other. He felt invincible. He felt like he would live until 200. And then again, when you see what happened to his daughter, who, seemed to have so many of the traits that made Kobe successful, being a girl dad. I mean, I painted my kid's toenails this morning because she asked me to, and I my wife and I go, hey, this is girl needs. I keep coming back to the fact that sports has taught us something, and that's to be a teammate. And right now, all of us together, we got to be on the same team. And the sooner we can do that, the sooner we can all be on the same team, the sooner we get through this. When you have a few bad apples, especially in this case, they can ruin it for everybody by, again, not adhering to social distancing. I get it. Some of us, we have to work. And not everybody is maybe fortunate enough where they can just stay home. But if we can all get on the same page, if we can all be a teammate, I think we get through this quicker. And the countries that have gotten through this quicker, there has been uniformity. There has been unity. There has been this sense of, hey, let's all be in this together. Let's all do our part together. Let's sacrifice individually for the greater good so that we can share and reap the benefits collectively once this is over, and it will end sooner. But folks on our front line, our doctors, our EMTs, our nurses, our the folks working in grocery stores, the folks who still have to go to work and provide the essential services our country needs, I think we all owe them a debt of gratitude. And so it is sometimes troubling to see people protesting to the faces of these people and not taking what's going on seriously. We need to side with these people because right now they're helping us, and gratitude that I don't think we'll ever be able to repay.
Yeah, so well said. And whoever is in the chat or joined the chat, please, my cousin and I and my brother, we have a GoFundMe page going on right now for the frontline people and all the local food businesses. We raised over $2,000 already. So we're looking for, please, everyone please go check the link. It's in my bio on Instagram. And we already handed out food supplies to all the nurses, doctors, cops. And we went to the soup kitchen today to deliver stuff. So we're trying to make this go quicker, and we can use the help in any way. But if you guys can't donate, it's fine. But anything will help. But so there he is, the great Anish Shroff from ESPN. He does a great job. Go follow him on Twitter, Instagram. So I just want to say this was awesome. I'm honored to have you on today, and I actually interviewed a couple of your colleagues in Nabil Kareem, Damian Woody, Jay Harris, Anita Collins. So I had the honor of interviewing them in the last week and a couple of weeks ago. So I'm just honored for you guys to agree to this, and keep up the great work, Anish, and you and your family stay safe.